confess to you that after doing this for 35 years, that I had spoken to many juries, and I've always begun in exactly the same way, very nervous. I have a very important role to play at this moment, and I recognize that role. My job at this point is to help you to understand what it is that you are about to hear in this case. You have heard us speak in general terms about what the evidence would show during jury selection, but those general terms were only for the purpose of determining whether you were appropriate jurors to serve in this case. Now, it's my responsibility to talk to you in more detail about what the evidence in this case will in fact actually show. It's somewhat like giving you a you hear from this podium is not evidence in this case. The evidence in this case is going to be what you hear from the witness stand. So if I tell you to expect to hear something that is different than what you actually hear, then you should rely on what you hear from the witnesses and not from what you have heard me say. This case, ladies and gentlemen, is essentially about three primary individuals. There are a lot of other individuals involved, the children, for example, but essentially we are talking about three primary participants. The first of those is Grant Hayes. Grant Hayes is the classic sociopath. On the one hand, he is very talented. He's a talented musician. He is very charming. He is very witty. He is very charismatic. He is very intelligent. But on the other hand, he is also very controlling. He is very manipulative. He is very deceitful. He is very dishonest. And most of all, he is very dangerous. He's already been tried in this case and has been convicted of the first-degree murder of Laura Ackerson. And for that, he is serving life in prison without parole. Now, during the custody dispute that was going on between Laura and Grant, they were ordered by the court to participate in a child custody evaluation. That evaluation was performed by Dr. Ginger Calloway. As part of that evaluation, both Laura and Grant were required to prepare and give to Dr. Calloway documents, what are called parenting history reports. Laura prepared a very meticulous report. She reported a great many of the characteristics that Grant had exhibited through the 4 years that she knew him. I want to read to you one of the paragraphs that Laura wrote in her parenting history report for Dr. Calloway. I am of the belief that Grant has a personality disorder. After living with him for 4 years, I find a few labels that fit him, but one that is near perfect, sociopath. The others are narcissist, borderline personality, and psychopath. He likens himself to the main characters of these movies: 6 Degrees of Separation, with Will Smith and the talented Mr. Ripley. Grant told me that he is the character depicted in these movies. The Talented Mr. Ripley is a movie that was produced, I think, probably about 1995, in which Matt Damon plays the part of the sociopath Tom Ripley. Tom Ripley is hired by a wealthy businessman in America to go to Italy and convince his son Dickie to return back to the United States to participate in the family business. Tom Ripley does go to Italy, but rather than bringing Dickie back to the United States, he kills him, and he assumes his identity. He then proceeds to contrive a very complicated scheme for concealing what he has done. Ultimately, he inherits what Dickie was supposed to inherit, and in order to conceal from everyone that he had met and everyone that he encountered along the way, he had to kill and lie in order to preserve the secret. That's the sociopath that Grant Hayes believed himself to be. There are two victims in this case. One is Laura Ackerson. Laura believed that she was married to Grant. Grant had even deceived her about that. He wasn't really married to her. She believed it for years. But Grant had not signed the marriage certificate. He led her to believe all that time that they were married, but when it came right down to it, she discovered much later that it wasn't true. It was all a trick. In the meantime, they had the two boys, little Grant and Gentle. The boys were very adorable. They were at that age when they climb in your lap and want you to read books to them. Laura loved those boys, absolutely loved them. There had been a previous custody arrangement in which Laura had only had the boys in her custody on weekends. She lived in Kinston, and Grant had the boys for 5 days in Raleigh. But Laura had had some difficulties in her life in getting a job and so forth, but she had turned things around, and she decided that she wanted more custody rights than what she had just on the weekends. And that began a custody battle between Laura and Grant that became more and more bitter as the time for the custody hearing approached. The hearing was scheduled for August 15, 2011 in Kinston, and as that date approached, Dr. Calloway had provided Grant with a copy of her report and her recommendations, and he wasn't happy about it at all. Now, as the time for that hearing approached, Grant and Laura were becoming more and more hostile towards each other. The arguments were becoming more frequent. Amanda was playing the role of the peacekeeper. She tried to convince both of them that the two of you need to get along, if not for yourselves, for the sake of your children. You need to try to put your differences aside and work this out in some way that best benefits little Grant and Gentle. Now, the second victim in this case is Amanda. You'll find that throughout the evidence that you will hear that there are enormous parallels between how Grant treated Laura and how he treated Amanda, how he manipulated both of them, how he controlled both of them, how he lied to both of them, how he deceived both of them. He treated them the same. Grant saw women as people who needed to be controlled by him. They needed to be submissive to him. Now, Amanda was living in St. John's in the Virgin Islands when she met Grant. Amanda owned an art store there. Grant was living in a shack performing his musical, what he was calling gigs. I suppose that's the correct term. But he was performing musical gigs at various nightclubs and restaurants, essentially in exchange for a little bit of money and food. Amanda was someone who had a good bit of money at that time. Her first husband had passed away in a swimming accident, and at the time that Grant met her in St. John's, she had $188,000 at her immediate disposal. She had $70,000 worth of jewelry. Grant had nothing. What he saw was the opportunity to maneuver himself into Amanda's life so that he could get her money. And how did he do it? He used little Grant as his bait. Those children meant nothing to Grant. Grant used them constantly as what Laura calls social bait. If you can pass a cute little boy around, then the girls swarm to you, and that's what he was using his children for, was to get what he wanted from those that he wished to manipulate. Grant referred to Amanda as his investor. By the time they got married April 2010. They had met in the latter part of 2009. They were married in April 2010. By the end of that year, by the end of 2010, 7-8 months later, Grant had all of the money. He had sold the jewelry. He was off traveling around the country, at least either doing musical gigs or pretending to do musical gigs. We don't know which. And Amanda was the one who was left at home with the two boys. And then by July of 2011, she had had a baby of her own. Grant had managed to isolate her. He had her in the home, and he was out gallivanting around the country, spending her money. By July of 2011, she was broke. The money was gone. The jewelry had been hot, and both she and Grant were about to be evicted from the apartment that they shared in Raleigh. The plan was at that point that they would move in with his parents who lived in Kinston. There was nowhere else to go. Now, Grant had told his friends that he wanted to marry a Stepford wife. Amanda had been an extra in the movie The Stepford Wives. Some of you, I recall from jury selection, had seen The Stepford Wives, and it's about an idyllic village in Connecticut where the husbands program their wives into doing everything that they want done for their benefit. Wash the dishes, cook the food, clean the house, look out for the children. From the movie, it turned out, as it turns out, the women had been programmed to be robots. Here's what Grant wrote himself. He rented the Stepford Wives, just something to fall asleep to in the middle of the day. He dreamed that he had actually acquired and married one of the robots. From the movie. Recently divorced, he put forth the intention to remarry, but only to a well put together, classically choreographed Stepford wife. He even used those exact words when describing his future missus to his friends and audiences. Little did he know the universe was listening. Arrangements were being made. People and events. 4 years later, a beautiful widow who had actually played one of the Stepford wives sat watching him. Grant was looking for someone that he could control, and he found someone not only that he could control, but who had money that he, if he played his cards correctly, could get. And that was his goal. So what happened on July 13th, 2011? We know that the custody hearing was rapidly approaching. We know that on that day that arrangements had been made for Laura to come to Raleigh to take the boys to Monkey Joe's, which is an indoor playground for children. But she was running late. She didn't get to Raleigh in time to take the boys to Monkey Joe because I think she was supposed to be here around 3 o'clock, and Monkey Joe's doesn't stay open but so late. So she arrived later. At Grant's request, she came to the apartment where Amanda and Grant lived together. What Grant wanted to do was discuss with her a financial resolution of the custody dispute. But he didn't want little Grant and Gentle to hear him talking about the children in terms of money. So he asked Amanda to take the boys into the bedroom while he talked to Laura at the kitchen table. Laura and Grant sat at the kitchen table and worked out the terms of a settlement agreement. You'll hear evidence that a written settlement agreement was found someplace in the kitchen later. Essentially, the terms of that settlement agreement were written partly in Grant's handwriting and partly in Laura's handwriting. It provided that Grant would pay her $25,000 and that she, in exchange, would drop the custody dispute but could have visitation whenever she wanted with little Grant in jail. Amanda was still in the bedroom. She was back in the bedroom with Lily, her now 1-month-old daughter, and the 2 little boys. She came out of the bedroom, walked over to the table, and saw that the 2 of them, Grant and Laura, had written out this settlement agreement. Laura asked her if she could hold Lily, and Amanda simply turned around and walked away. As she was walking away, Laura came up behind her and tripped over the rug. And when she did, she bumped into Amanda's back, and Amanda called out for Grant. Grant then grabbed Laura from the back and in an effort to pull her away. And as he did, the 2 of them, Laura and Grant, tripped and fell to the floor. Amanda continued on into the bedroom. A few minutes later, Grant came into the bedroom and told her that he was going to have to call EMS to come attend to Laura, and that he would help her into the bathroom while Amanda took the boys and Lily out of the house and took them for a ride to have dinner or whatever, while EMS took care of Laura. Grant didn't want the boys to see EMS there attending to their mother and being concerned for her welfare. So Amanda left with the boys. She drove around for a while, and when she came back, Laura's car was still parked out front, but there were no EMS vehicles there. So she left again and took the boys to dinner at the Chick-fil-A. The boys and the baby, Lily. They go to the Chick-fil-A and they have dinner. They come back, and this time when they come back, Laura's car is gone. So she brings the 3 children into the house, and Grant is in there smoking heavily, but the children are tired, so she takes the children to the bedroom and puts them to bed. She gets that completed, and she comes back out, and Grant is talking on the telephone. He's talking to his mother. He walks out on the deck, and she overhears Grant tell his mother, "I'll see you tomorrow." But his mother lives in Kinston. Amanda asked Grant, "Well, where is Laura?" And what he tells her is that, as it turns out, everything was fine. Laura bumped her head, but she's okay. She's left. She's gone home. She's gone back to Kinston. Amanda went to bed believing that everything was fine. There was nothing to indicate that anything bad had happened. She believed that Laura was back home. She goes to bed, and Grant leaves the apartment at some time around midnight, and you will hear, as Mr. Zellinger indicated, the various different places that he went that night, but you're also going to hear how he has been tracked beginning from midnight on July, which would now be July 14th, at midnight until midnight of July 16th, when they left to go to Texas. You will hear how we have tracked Grant's movement during that 3-day period. We've done it using modern technology, receipts, videos, things of that nature. We can tell you with a great deal of precision where we think he killed Laura. We can also tell you with a great deal, although less precision, where we think he dismembered her body. Amanda had absolutely nothing to do with it. She did not know that Laura had been killed. She did not know that Laura had not returned home, just as Grant had told her. He concealed everything that he did, practically everything that he did, from her for the next 3 days. He comes up with the idea that let's go to see your sister in Texas. Your mother died, you were pregnant at the time that she died, and you never got a chance to go see her back when all this was going on. This would be a good time to go see her. We're moving this weekend, so we can rent a U-Haul trailer, and on the trip, what we can do is take a piece of furniture that we have in storage and give it to Karen, her sister in Texas. They call Karen and ask, is it okay to come to visit? She says yes. Is it okay? Would you like to have the piece of furniture? This is very, very important. Later, Grant takes the piece of furniture and puts it in the front of the U-Haul trailer. It's a big piece of furniture. It comes apart in 2 different pieces. It won't fit in there in one piece, so he takes it with the help of a friend and puts it in the front of the trailer. In the meantime, unknown to Amanda, Grant has been out doing some very, very bad things. He has killed Laura. He has dismembered her body. He's bought coolers. He's bought chainsaws. He's bought ice. And as they begin the trip to Texas, sometime around midnight on July the 16th, unknown to Amanda, Laura's body is concealed in the back of that U-Haul trailer, hidden behind furniture that totally conceals what's behind it. They get to Texas Monday morning, July the 18th, and since they've been traveling, most of the Monday is spent sleeping. That night, Monday night, July the 18th, Amanda sees Grant pacing around the front yard. He's acting very upset and very nervous. And she goes out into the front yard and asks him what's going on. And he tells her when Laura fell that night in the apartment that she hit her head and that she died, it was an accident. It wasn't intended to happen that way. She died, it was an accident, and you have got to help me convince your sister to help me dispose of her body. And if you don't do it, then none of us are getting out of here alive. And if I can't do it, then I can get it done with one telephone call. He pulls out a machete, and I'm sure all of you know what a machete is. It's a knife about this big. And he whacks her across the leg with it. And he says, this is what you can expect if you don't think I mean business. Here's what you've got to do. You've got to tell your sister that you're the one who knocked Laura down accidentally and caused her death. Karen will never help me, a black man from North Carolina, if she thinks that I'm the one that did it. So what you've got to do is tell her that you're the one that knocked her down, not me. Otherwise, she just won't do anything to help me. The next morning, Amanda tells it to Karen just the way that Grant has told her to tell it. That she knocked Laura down, and that she hurt her badly, and that her body is in the back of the U-Haul. But Karen's older than Amanda and had helped raise her. Karen sat Amanda down and said, I want you to tell me the truth, just like I did when you were a child. I want you to tell me the truth, and this is the time to do it. Are you covering for Grant? And she nodded her head affirmatively that she was, in fact, covering for Grant. Amanda did help Grant dispose of Laura's body in Texas, but she did it only because of fear for what might happen to her and to the children if she didn't help. Now, Amanda is charged with 2 different offenses here. She's charged with first-degree murder, which, as you know, is the premeditated, deliberate killing of another person. The evidence will show she had absolutely nothing to do with killing Laura, not a single thing. Grant had concealed everything from her. Grant, the sociopath and the master manipulator, had hidden from her, but not only from her, from everyone in the entire world, what he had done. He didn't want anyone to know. When the second, well, let me go to this. The second charge the second offense that Amanda is charged with is being an accessory after the fact to a homicide that Grant committed by killing Laura. The state alleges in that indictment that Grant, not Amanda, killed Laura, and that what Amanda did was to somehow assist Grant in the disposal of her body when she was in Texas. The 2 offenses are diametrically opposed to each other. On the one hand, they say she committed first-degree murder. On the other hand, they say that Grant is the person that committed the murder, but that you voluntarily helped dispose of the body in Texas. Now, you will hear evidence that there are certain legal requirements to the various 2 offenses with which she's charged. All of the evidence, we contend, will indicate that she did not participate in the homicide. That question, we believe, is simply off the table. Here's the real issue that you will be called upon to decide. Did Amanda voluntarily help Grant dispose of Laura's body? Is she innocent of accessory after the fact of murder, or is she guilty of that offense? The law excuses her from criminal liability for accessory after the fact if she acted under duress. That is, that she did so out of fear for her own safety and the safety of her children. It also excuses her from criminal liability if she did not know at the time that Grant had actually killed Laura. What Grant told her wasn't that he had killed Laura, but that she had accidentally died in the fall. That's what Amanda believed when she helped dispose of the body. We don't dispute that she did that. We dispute the reason that she did it. Now, we believe that once you have heard all of the evidence in this case, that you will conclude that Grant, the sociopath, has manipulated, deceived, and concealed everything that he had done from Amanda until it became absolutely necessary that he tell her that Laura's body was in the back of that U-Haul trailer, hidden behind the furniture. He had to tell her then because he was in the position that he had to have someone help him, and he knew that Karen, the sister, wouldn't agree unless she thought that Amanda was the one who had accidentally killed Laura. It was Grant's idea to go to Texas. He could have disposed of Laura's body anywhere in North Carolina, any number of 1,000 different places. But he specifically chose to take her body to Texas in the back of that U-Haul trailer. Why did he do that? Grant, the master deceiver, was telling Amanda, you've got to tell your sister that you're the one that hurt her. He wanted it to appear that it was Amanda, not him, who had caused Laura's death. Grant, the master manipulator, the professional liar, a man who has been convicted of first-degree murder, who is described throughout the various parenting history surveys as someone who was dangerous and someone who couldn't even tell the truth about what he had eaten for dinner. Ladies and gentlemen, we believe that the evidence that you hear from this witness stand will convince you that Amanda did not participate in any way in Laura's death. The question that you will be called upon to decide is whether she voluntarily participated in concealing what Grant had done. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you, counsel, for both sides. Ladies and gentlemen, you've heard no evidence in this case. You've heard a forecast of what the lawyers say and contend you're going to hear. If that forecast turns out to be inaccurate, you'll disregard it completely. What the evidence in fact shows or will show or fail to